You know the feeling. It's January. The air is sharp, the water is cold, and you haven't had a bite in 3 hours. You pull out your phone, check the weather app, and see that high-pressure system sitting right on top of you. You sigh and say it. Well, guess the fish just aren't biting today. It's the weather. Sound familiar? We've all done it. But what if I told you that 90% of the time that's a complete lie? What if the problem isn't in the sky, but right in your hands? In this video, we're going to dismantle the #1 excuse in winter fishing. I promise you, by the end of this, you will look at those tough, cold, bluebird sky days not as a curse, but as a challenge you can actually win. We're going to expose the real reasons you're failing in January, and it has very little to do with the barometer. So, let me ask you this right now, and be honest in the comments. Do you truly believe a fish just decides not to eat for an entire day because of the air pressure? For generations, the fishing world has been built on a foundation of old wisdom. Our grandfathers told us, the magazines told us, the fishing shows told us, watch the barometer, fish bite best when it's falling. This idea is so ingrained in our minds that it's become an unshakable law. We plan our trips around cold fronts. We see our high-pressure system and our confidence plummets before we even make a cast. Why? Because it's easy. It's the perfect no-fault-of-my-own excuse for a tough day on the water. It's much easier to blame an invisible force of nature than to look at our own techniques, our own decisions, and admit that maybe, just maybe, we are the ones doing it wrong. This shared belief creates a cycle of failure. Angler A doesn't catch anything, blames the weather. He tells Angler B, who also isn't catching anything, and they both agree. Soon, the entire lake is full of people just going through the motions, waiting for the weather to change instead of changing what they're doing. Today, we break that cycle. First things first, let's get something straight. Does weather have an influence on fish behavior? Of course it does. Fish are living creatures, and they are absolutely affected by their environment. A major cold front can push them deeper. A stable, warming trend can pull them shallower. Nobody is denying that. But the myth we're busting today is the idea that certain weather conditions create an on/off switch for feeding. The belief that on a high-pressure day all the fish in the lake form a pact to go on a hunger strike is just plain wrong. Fish still have to eat. Their metabolism might be slower, their feeding windows might be shorter and more subtle, but they do not stop eating entirely. The problem is that anglers continue to use the same aggressive, fast-paced tactics they use in the spring and then act surprised when a lethargic, cold-water fish ignores them. The weather isn't the off switch. Your technique is simply the wrong key for the lock. You're trying to kick down a door that requires a gentle touch to open. So where does the real problem start? It starts with location. This is mistake #1, and it's a big one. Think about your favorite spot to fish in May. It's probably a shallow flat, maybe near some spawning beds with lots of cover. You crushed them there all spring. Now it's January, the water temperature is 40 degrees. And where are you fishing? That exact same spot. You're casting into the ghost town of a once thriving neighborhood. The fish are gone. In winter, fish behavior is dictated by two things: stable temperature and easy access to food. They aren't interested in spawning or aggressively defending territory. They are conserving energy. This means they drop off those shallow flats and move to more stable, vertical environments. Think steep bluff walls, deep channel swings, the ends of long tapering points, or deep holes in creeks. The water temperature in these places is more consistent, and they can move up or down in the water column to feed without expending much energy. Blaming the weather when you're fishing in a barren, shallow flat in January is like complaining that there are no shoppers at the mall at 3 in the morning You're not in the right place at the right time. Let's dig deeper into that idea of energy conservation. You have to understand what's happening inside the fish's body. A bass, for example, is cold-blooded. Its body temperature and metabolism are dictated by the water around it. In 75-degree water, its metabolism is roaring. It digests food quickly and needs to hunt actively to keep fueling its furnace. It will chase a fast-moving crankbait 20 feet because it's an opportunistic, high-energy predator. Now drop that water temperature to 40 degrees. Its metabolism has slowed to a crawl. It might take that fish days to digest a single, small baitfish. It is not going to waste precious energy chasing something across the bottom. It becomes an ambush predator of the highest order, waiting for a ridiculously easy meal to drift right in front of its face. When you finally understand this biological reality, everything about your winter approach should change. You are no longer hunting for an aggressive athlete. You are trying to tempt a creature that is in a state of semi-hibernation. The weather didn't make it lazy, the cold water did. This brings us to the second massive mistake, and it's directly tied to your hands, your retrieve speed. This is arguably the biggest reason for failure in the winter. Most anglers fish way, way too fast. Imagine a scene. You're out on the lake. It's a cold, calm morning. You're throwing a jig. You cast it out, let it hit the bottom, and you immediately pop it once, twice, reel up the slack, and repeat. You cover the cast in about 45 seconds. Nothing. So you make another one, maybe a little faster. You're covering water, right? That's what you're supposed to do. But what you're actually doing is pulling your lure away from lethargic fish that might have been interested. They see it. They might even start to slowly move towards it. But by the time they decide to commit, the lure is already 10 feet away. You have to force yourself to slow down to a pace that feels painfully, almost stupidly slow. We're talking about letting a jig sit on the bottom for 20 or 30 seconds without moving it. We're talking about a retrieve that can take 3 to 5 minutes to complete. The weather doesn't make the fish ignore your lure. Your impatience does. Let's paint a clearer picture of what slow really means. Consider the Ned rig, a classic winter and tough bite bait. The average angler casts it out, lets it sink, and then starts twitching it or dragging it back to the boat. The truly successful winter angler does something different. They cast it to a high percentage target, like a rock pile on a deep point. They let it sink on a semi-slack line, watching for any jump or tick as it falls. Once it hits the bottom, they do nothing. They just let it sit there for a long, long time. The subtle currents in the water will impart all the action that little piece of plastic needs. That tiny tail will quiver, looking like a dying morsel. A lethargic bass, staring at that for 30 seconds, might finally be tempted to just inhale it. After that long pause, the angler won't hop the bait. They'll just slowly pull it, dragging it a mere 6 inches across the bottom, and then they'll pause again. This is a game of inches and minutes, not feet and seconds. You are not trying to trigger a reaction strike. You are trying to present a meal so easy, so effortless, that the fish would be stupid not to eat it. Okay, let's talk about what's on the end of your line. Mistake number 3, your lure size. There's a classic saying in fishing, big baits catch big fish. And in the spring and fall, when big fish are bulking up, that is often true. But in the dead of winter, it can be your biggest enemy. Remember that slow metabolism we talked about? A big fish isn't looking for a massive Thanksgiving-sized meal that will take it a week to digest. It's looking for a small, easy-to-digest snack that provides maximum caloric intake for minimum effort. This is why techniques like the Ned rig, the drop shot with a tiny 4-inch worm, or a small 3-inch swim bait on a light jig head dominate in the winter. Anglers who are still throwing giant 8-inch swim baits or bulky full-size jigs with huge trailers are presenting a meal that most fish simply are not willing to commit to. It's not that they can't eat it, it's that their instinct for energy conservation tells them it's not worth the effort. Downsizing your presentation is one of the most immediate and effective changes you can make. Go from a 1/2 ounce jig to a 1/4 ounce. Go from a 5-inch swim bait to a 3-inch. It makes a world of difference. To really hammer this point home, think about the available forage in the winter. In many lakes, the large bait fish from the previous year have been thinned out by predators. What's left are the young of the year shad or minnows, which are often very small. The fish are conditioned to feeding on these smaller morsels. Your giant lure looks unnatural and intimidating, but a tiny, subtle presentation perfectly matches the hatch of the available food source. This isn't just about size, but also about profile. A bulky jig with a big, flapping craw trailer creates a lot of water displacement and has a large silhouette. A simple, small finesse worm on a drop shot has a tiny, non-threatening profile. It looks like an easy victim. When you're fishing on a tough, high-pressure day, you want to appeal to the fish's most basic instinct, the desire for an effortless meal. Stop trying to challenge them with a big, flashy bait and start trying to trick them with a small, pathetic-looking one. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's exactly what the conditions call for. Let's move up the line from your lure. This is mistake number 4, and it's one that even experienced anglers make. It's your fishing line. In the summer, when the water is often stained or choppy, you can get away with using heavy, thick line. But in January, the water is often at its clearest point of the entire year. Cold water is denser, causing sediment to settle. Algae dies off. The result is gin-clear visibility. That 20-pound test monofilament or heavy braid you were using is now as visible as a rope to a spooky, line-shy fish. In these conditions, fluorocarbon line is not a luxury, it's a necessity. It has a refractive index very close to that of water, making it nearly invisible. Furthermore, anglers often use line that is way too heavy. You don't need 20-pound test to fish a tiny Ned rig. Dropping down to 6 or 8-pound test will not only make your line less visible, but it will also allow your small baits to have a much more natural action in the water. That heavy line is like an anchor, killing the subtle movements that trigger bites. Let's talk about the stealth factor, which is directly related to that clear winter water. In winter, everything you do is amplified. The water is often calmer, meaning sound travels farther. The fish are more on edge and less willing to tolerate pressure. This means you have to be quieter and more deliberate. Are you dropping things on the deck of your boat? That sound telegraphs through the hull and into the water. Are you running your trolling motor on high, right over the spot you want to fish? You're likely spooking every fish in the area before your lure even hits the water. Even your shadow casting over a piece of cover can be enough to shut down the bite. You have to approach winter fishing with the mindset of a hunter, not a bulldozer. Make long casts past your target and work the lure into the strike zone. Use your electronics to find fish from a distance, then position your boat quietly and make a precise presentation. It's these little 1% details that make all the difference on a tough day, and none of them have anything to do with the weather. Here's another tool in your arsenal that becomes 10 times more important in the winter: scent. Think about it. When a fish is active and feeding by sight, scent is a secondary factor. It sees the flash of a spinnerbait and reacts. But when a fish is lethargic, sitting on the bottom in 40-degree water, its world shrinks. It might not be actively looking for a meal, but its sense of smell is always working. Your plastic lure that smells like a factory is not appealing. A lure that has the scent of a shad or a crawfish, however, can be the final trigger that convinces a neutral fish to bite. When you are fishing incredibly slowly, letting a bait soak for 30 seconds or more, scent has time to disperse in the water, creating a small cloud of attraction around your bait. A fish might move in to investigate the smell and find your easy meal waiting. This is why many pro anglers are meticulous about applying scent to their baits, especially in the winter. It's not a magic bullet, but it's another small advantage that you can control, unlike the barometric pressure. Now let's talk about a specific technique that weaponizes patience. It's called dead sticking. It is the absolute pinnacle of slow fishing, and it is brutally effective in the winter, yet most anglers don't have the discipline to do it. It works with a variety of baits, a fluke-style bait, a stick worm like a senko, or even a finesse jig. The concept is simple. You cast the bait out to a high percentage area, and you do nothing. You let it sink to the bottom on a completely slack line, and then you wait, and you might watch your line for a full minute or two for any sign of a tick or movement. Fish will often see the bait lying motionless on the bottom and simply swim over and pick it up, and the only indication you'll get is your line starting to slowly swim away. This technique requires supreme confidence and patience. It feels like you're not doing anything, but in reality, you are doing exactly what the conditions demand, presenting the most non-threatening, easy meal possible. If you can master the art of doing nothing, you will catch fish that other anglers, with their constant hopping and twitching, will never even know are there. So what about that barometer? Let's finally tackle the big myth head-on. The common wisdom is that a high, stable barometer after a cold front means a terrible bite. This is called a post-frontal condition. The sky is bright blue, there's no wind, and the fish get lockjaw. While it's true that the bite can be tougher, it's not because the fish are physically unable to eat. The change in pressure and the bright sun often pushes them tighter to cover or deeper into the water column. They become more cautious. They don't roam as much. So the angler who is fishing the same way they did before the front, making random casts across open water, will fail. But the angler who adapts will succeed. They will slow down, they will target very specific pieces of cover like deep brush piles or sunken timber, and they will make repeated, precise casts to those spots. They understand the fish haven't disappeared. They've just consolidated into smaller, more predictable areas. The high pressure isn't a stop sign, it's a roadmap telling you exactly where you need to be more methodical. I remember a specific trip a few years ago in late January. The forecast was horrible for fishing. We had a massive cold front push through, the temperature dropped 20 degrees overnight, and the sky was that painful, cloudless blue. The barometer had shot way up. Every fishing forum and old-timer at the ramp said, "Don't even bother, stay home." My buddy and I decided to go anyway, just to prove a point. For the first 2 hours, we caught nothing, fishing our usual spots. We were starting to believe the hype. Then we made a change. We went to the steepest, ugliest-looking bluff wall on the entire lake. We got right up against it and used our electronics to find a tiny, underwater ledge that was about 30 feet down. We dropped tiny drop-shot worms right on top of that ledge. For the next 3 hours, we caught over 15 beautiful bass, all from that one tiny spot. The rest of the dozen boats we saw on the lake, we didn't see a single one of them catch a fish. They were out in the middle, casting and winding, blaming the weather. We didn't defy the conditions, we adapted to them. This leads us to the most powerful and most overlooked factor in all of winter fishing, the mental game. When you launch your boat already believing that you're not going to catch anything because the weather is bad, you have already lost. That belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You won't be as focused, you'll make sloppy casts, you'll retrieve a little too fast, because you're just going through the motions. You'll give up on a spot after 5 minutes instead of giving it the 15 it might need. Blaming the weather is a mental escape hatch. It's a way to let yourself off the hook for failure. The successful winter angler, on the other hand, approaches these bad days as a puzzle to be solved. They have a core belief that the fish are there and they can be caught. Their mindset isn't, "I hope I get a bite." It's, "What do I need to do differently to make them bite?" This single shift in perspective is more important than any lure or rod you could ever buy. Stop letting the forecast defeat you before you even leave the dock. Let's also touch on the gear fallacy. A lot of anglers think that to be successful in winter, you need a whole new set of expensive, specialized gear. You need ultra-sensitive graphite rods, high-speed reels, and a tackle box full of $100 baits. And while quality gear is nice to have, it is not the solution. I have seen countless anglers with $3,000 setups get outfished by a guy in a John boat with 2 old spinning rods. Why? Because the guy in the John boat understood the fundamentals. He knew he had to slow down. He knew where the fish were likely to be. He was using the right size line and a small, simple bait. Your success is not determined by the price tag of your equipment. It's determined by the decisions you make with it. A $500 rod doesn't help you if you're fishing in the wrong place with the wrong technique. So, before you go spend a fortune on new gear, first, master the techniques we're talking about today. Your wallet will thank you, and so will your fish count. Instead of looking at the sky, you need to be reading the water. And in winter, that means paying attention to the most subtle of clues. One of the biggest factors is water temperature. Even a 1-degree difference can be huge. You should be constantly monitoring your boat's temperature gauge as you move around the lake. A creek arm that is getting more direct sunlight might be 1 or 2 degrees warmer than the main lake. That's enough to draw in baitfish, and the predators will follow. Look for things like rocks and riprap banks that absorb solar heat and radiate it into the water. Look for discharges from power plants or springs that create pockets of warmer water. These are the magnets that concentrate fish in the winter. The guy who spends his day searching for these subtle temperature breaks will always outperform the guy who is just randomly casting at the bank, complaining about the cold. You're not looking for fish everywhere. You're looking for the specific, small zones where they are most likely to be active. Another key part of this is the power of observation before you even make a cast. Pull up to a new spot and just stop for a moment. Don't immediately start fishing. Look at your electronics. Are you marking baitfish? Are you seeing arches that look like bigger fish suspended near the bottom? Look at the water's surface. Do you see any flickers from baitfish even in the cold? Look at the bank. What does the contour tell you about what's under the water? Is it a steep drop or a slow taper? Taking just 5 minutes to assess a spot before you bombard it with casts can tell you everything you need to know. It will help you choose the right lure, the right casting angle, and the right retrieve. Most anglers are in such a rush to start fishing that they skip this crucial intelligence gathering phase. Patience isn't just about a slow retrieve, it's about a patient and methodical overall approach to breaking down the water. Haste and winter fishing do not mix. It's critical to understand that success in January isn't usually about one magical change. It's not one secret lure or one magic spot. It's about the 1% rule. It's the cumulative effect of doing a dozen little things correctly. It's downsizing your lure, that's 1%. It's switching to a lighter, invisible fluorocarbon line, that's another 1%. It's slowing your retrieve down to a crawl, that's a big 5%. It's adding scent to your bait. It's being quiet in the boat. It's finding that 1-degree temperature change. It's making a precise cast instead of a random one. When you start stacking all of these small adjustments on top of each other, they add up to a massive increase in your odds of success. Meanwhile, the angler who is ignoring all these details is operating at a huge disadvantage. He's wondering why he's not getting bites, and he looks up at the sky for an answer. The answer isn't up there. It's in the details he's ignoring. So let's bring it all back to the original question. Is it the weather, or is it your hands? By now, the answer should be crystal clear. The weather simply sets the stage. It creates the conditions and the rules of the game for that particular day. It tells you that the fish are likely to be deep, lethargic, and positioned near specific types of structure. The weather is the puzzle. Your hands, your brain, and your approach are how you solve it. You can either accept the conditions and adapt your strategy to fit them, or you can ignore them, fish the way you always do, and then use the weather as a convenient excuse for your failure. The choice is entirely yours. Next time you're on the water on a cold, tough January day and you feel the urge to blame the high-pressure system, I want you to stop. Look down at your rod and reel. Ask yourself, am I fishing too fast? Is my lure too big? Is my line too heavy? Am I even in a high-percentage winter area? Be honest with yourself. 9 times out of 10, the problem is right there in your own hands. So, there you have it. The tough truth about January fishing. The biggest takeaway, the real plot twist here, is that the weather isn't your enemy, it's your instruction manual. A high-pressure bluebird sky isn't a sign to go home. It's a signal to slow down, to downsize, and to get surgical with your location. For years, we've used the weather as a shield to protect our egos from the sting of a tough day. But once you realize that you have direct control over almost every factor that actually leads to a bite, your speed, your lure choice, your location, your stealth, it's incredibly empowering. It means you are never truly at the mercy of the conditions. You can always make an adjustment. You can always solve the puzzle. Thank you so much for watching and for being willing to challenge some old, stubborn ideas about fishing. If this changed your perspective, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content that cuts through the noise. And now for the big question I want you to debate in the comments. What is the single biggest mistake you think you've been making in your winter fishing? Be honest. Let's learn from each other. We'll see you on the next one.